Today we welcome world-renowned practicing astrologer and teacher Erin Sullivan, author of Saturn in Transit, Family Dynamics, The Astrology of Midlife and Aging, and the classic Retrograde Planets. Welcome, Erin.
Hi, thank you. It's good to see everybody again.
Great. Looking forward to your presentation.
Okay. Shall I start then?
Yes, thank you.
I like taking orders. Okay. I'm going to do, because many of you may have come to the first one, but I'm just going to very quickly go through what composite charts are, and I'm not going to make a big long thing, because you can look at the one just previous that was done last month with Freud and Jung. And this introduction was quite lengthy and very, very explicit, but I'm going to make it reasonably quick so that we can get straight into the horoscopes, which are absolutely amazing. Okay, so a composite horoscope is the meeting place between literally you and me. So if I and Linda, for example, have a composite chart, no matter where we are in the world, she's way down there in Australia and I'm way up here in the southwest of the United States, our meeting point will remain the same no matter where we go. And because it's the horoscope that isn't real, it's only a composite of the two charts where each planet meets, like your sun meets my sun, your Mars meets my Mars, in a midpoint fashion. So no matter where we go, we're always bound by this. And I've had some interesting situations where people's composite charts were very active before they met. And when they met, there were transits to the composite chart. And the transits described a meeting place, where they finally came together as a pair, where there's the relationship, which is the meeting place of the one individual and the other individual. So this is, say, me, the sun, and the other person's sun. And the exact point along the zodiac, in the closest meeting place, is the composite midpoint, and it's the composite sun. The next image is a little more explanatory, in the sense that it can show you that the most awkward one that people run into, I mean, the problem is no longer existent, because we have, really good composite chart calculations in our various astrology programs. But, I had to do it when I was learning astrology in the early mid-60s. I had to actually figure out the composite chart myself, as everybody did. I mean, everybody was a genius, basically, in order to do that in those days. But you notice I've put the 1 and 2 and then the big explosion. So it's where one person meets the other person and they become a composite. They become a unified entity in themselves. The composite chart is very active in people's relationships. And another way of showing something really graphic is if two planets, like, say, my sun and my friend's sun, are actually 90 degrees apart, like my sun squares their sun, then the midpoint would actually meet again in the middle of 45 degrees away from either of our suns, and therefore dissolve the square as a composite in the relationship and really put it as a conjunction. The triangulation of planets' relationship shows that if there is a trine, say, between two points in the chart, two suns, then they will meet right in the middle, as it shows here. The most important thing to know, I think, not that you're going to be setting the charts, but the midpoint of, say, the sun opposite the sun And it may be even like 40 minutes difference in the opposition. I mean, they have to be exact in order to come together as one. So it would still do the calculation for the closest meeting point of the degree and also the minute of the two planets. So it could flip to the other one side or the other side of the zodiac. If mine was in Taurus and theirs was in Scorpio, but it was a couple of minutes, it could meet on either side of Leo or Aquarius. Yeah, you'll see better when I move on. So the midpoint of planetary squares, as I put here, it can actually be, 1 degree on either side of the sign. So you have to really be aware that there's a very tight calculation that goes on in here, because midpoints are exact. And unless, of course, they're running in a sequential degree, like called a cluster or a stellium. And if you want to review this, of course, there is the other part one of this where I did the other two charts of Jung and Freud. But here's a graphic example of what I just explained. And I actually made this. I cut up, several copies of something I found somewhere, and I taped them together, I pasted them onto a single page showing that there's person A, person C, and B, the relationship. And so this was really helpful for me because I used to I would just look at their each chart and I'd put person A's sun at 0 Taurus and person C's sun at 0 Libra. And then I would do that with all the subsequent planets, starting with the sun, the moon, the Mercury, and so forth to the bottom. And I would then draw a line from sun A to sun C. It would intersect at the Cancer Capricorn meeting place, the 15th degree. So what it actually becomes, because in this case I'm thinking, okay, because it is closer to the Cancer by exactitude, that composite sun of one person in Taurus and one person in Libra, they end up having a Cancer composite sun. So you can understand, now that's good for you to have in your head, that's how it happens, because sometimes our astrology diagrams aren't really that, they aren't really that clear. We don't really know, how do we get to this? Like, what, what's a midpoint? And so that's the point, so to speak, that I'm saying about what the midpoint really is when it comes to people. And so that is absolutely fascinating when you see it. And when you see the two people whom we're talking about today, Marie Salomea Sklodowsky and Pierre Curie, and their relationship. This is an ancient image of the sun, because the ultimate result of her work and his as well as what I called her frater mystica, like in alchemy, they always talk about the sort of soul sister, the helper of the alchemist, whereas in fact Pierre was at her soror mystica, so he was the male version. And so what we're looking at is, ultimately, all of their experiments ended up with the atom bomb as the outcome. So when I think in terms of their light and their shadow, and the shadow they cast on the world, as well as the light that they brought, the healing, I mean, scientists don't go into their work to kill people. That isn't their point. They're just so in their heads, and they've got this idea, and they have to have it brought out and created. And it's always done for the goodness of mankind, for humanity. And it's what other people do with that end result that it might become really dangerous. I mean, when radiation was discovered and used for cancer and like breast cancer, and also, the X-ray, when that was discovered and pictured by Röntgen, her friend. That also helped, say, in the Civil Wars, where they would take an X-ray of a wound and find the bullet so they could get it out. So scientists don't go around thinking, well, how am I going to do this to blow up the planet? They usually think about themselves, their work, and the long-term results. Now, I myself encountered Marie Curie when I was 13, and I became absolutely not obsessed, but gripped and fascinated by the woman. I was very young. I was just 13. So I didn't know astrology. I mean, I knew that her birthday was November 7th and I was November 9th. But I had no idea that there was this incredibly powerful link between myself and herself and her relationship to her work. There's a very good book, and I put it here, Obsessive Genius. I really recommend this book. It's excellent because when I was 13, there was only one book out. It was called Marie Curie by Eve Curie, her daughter. And so I read that book, and that's when I began to really take a very strong interest in her work. This is a picture of Pierre, who's obviously irresistible, and Marie, who is just beautiful. I mean, she was a very beautiful woman. And this is a symbol of the alchemical retort, of the container in which magic takes place. And there's a union of opposites, or a union of, in the case of classical alchemy, of the woman and the man. And, depicted in alchemical pictures, of which there are hundreds, that really show the union of opposites that create a unity. So that, essentially the composite chart could be called the alchemical chart of the two people, the alchemy of the relationship. And so one of the sort of stories in alchemy, very simply, is that there's a union between the king and the queen, symbolizing the sun and the moon, Sole, Luna. And when that union occurs, it becomes the hermaphrodite. There's no genderizing of the combination of the two. And the union, of course, does reflect the idea of the new moon, the sun-moon conjunction, and the absolute utter light powers of our planet, the sun and the moon, becoming unified as one, as basically the alchemical wedding. Here's a chart of Marie Curie. So I'll give you a chance to look at it a bit. It'll come up again a few times in the course of the next sort of 40, 50 minutes. Now, she has a very interesting horoscope in that she has a stellium in Scorpio, the sun at 14, Saturn at 29, Venus at 25. Oh, 25 and 25. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on. I'm going to put them on. Okay, yes, that's it. The Saturn-Venus conjunction in Scorpio, and Mars at 29, which is again conjunct Mercury. So she has this very tight stellium, but it's augmented, if you will, or explicated from that tight Sun, Saturn, Venus, Mars, Mercury link by the fact that she does have a grand trine. And grand trines are interesting. Grand trines are interesting because they are like a closed container. And a grand trine typically is always between three signs of the element that the grand trine takes place in. In her case, it's water. And well, water, it's sort of interesting because in the end, she ended up developing an invention which used heavy water, which would be very highly radioactive. And I have an article that I've never been able to publish. It's called Marie Curie, Promethea of the Nuclear Age. And I'm going to read something to you that her daughter wrote as the introduction to the book called Marie Curie, which was I still have the original printing in what they used to call boards, cloth-covered covers. And her sister daughter, Eve, opens the book with, I'm going to read this. The life of Marie Curie contains prodigies in such number that one would like to tell her story like a legend. She was a poor woman. She belonged to an oppressed nation. She was poor herself, and she was beautiful. A powerful vocation summoned her from her motherland, Poland, to study in Paris, where she lived through years of poverty and solitude. There she met a man whose genius was akin to hers. She married him, and their happiness was unique. By the most desperate and arid effort, they discovered a magic element, radium, for which Marie was the first woman to get a Nobel Prize. This discovery not only gave birth to a new science and a new philosophy, it provided humanity, I'm saying as mankind, with the means of treating a dreadful disease. So, you see, that was the whole point, was, we're going to cure cancer, we're going to make, follow my friend Rottinger and make the ability to see through solid matter into the sort of skeleton of whatever it is you're looking at. And the thing is with Marie is that she obviously is very intense. This is a very tight, sons had a very rigorous and very contained capacity to sustain long periods of drought and famine, which is basically what happened to her when she had a younger sister who was ready for university, but Marie said for her to go first and that she would go next. And so she slaved away as a nanny while her younger sister, went to the Sorbonne. And then when the time came and she was graduated, Marie herself moved to Paris. And was one of the first women, aside from her sister, to actually be in university. I mean, to be in the higher stages of learning. Sun in the ninth house of university, of higher education. But also the sun in the ninth house in Scorpio, involved in a grand trine to the moon in Pisces and Uranus in Cancer. So there's this kind of closed, secretive circuit between her solar power, her emotional depth, and her intuition, moon in Pisces, and her Uranus, tying those three together and very close in orb. And Uranus is, of course, the planet that was sighted, when she was born, but it was not really known because it hadn't got any cycles. Like now we have 4 returns of Uranus since it was sighted. So we actually have a history of Uranian activity and how it operates. But she has it in her 6th house. And of course, uranium was one of the elements that she discovered. And uranium, or Uranus, is actually called the bone seeker, which I think is gruesomely fascinating. So if Uranus is the bone seeker, and Pisces is a radiation, because and radiance, and the sun in Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, which was only seen 4 years before she died. There's something here about being in love with the mystery. Something was calling her to a place that didn't exist. And that's the thing that really fascinated me, was that when I got the horoscopes, and, as an astrologer, I'm just like going crazy, because I'm thinking, oh, this is amazing. This woman is known for plutonium. In fact, polonium, named after Poland, her father country, her fatherland, is also radioactive. So everything she ever did, anything that the Curies did, was absolutely redolent with death. Okay? But that was not why they did it. They did it because it took, that kind of mind and that combination of two people to combine to create something that would change the world. No kidding. So she has this closed circuit in water signs. And the water signs are usually identified as something to do with your emotional situation or your emotional condition and the way you relate. And emotionally. Grand trines, I call them closed circuits, in the sense that it runs around the agency of the sun in Scorpio, moves more quickly toward sort of the energy of Pisces, and then the energy of Uranus. And emotionally, if you have a sun moon trine, there's often an idealism of the family. She came out of a fabulous family, an incredible set of parents. And she had a great sadness in her home, because there was, deaths during plague times. And it was, really, she kept so much to herself. In fact, Einstein once said she's an amazing scientist, but a cold fish. Well, I really doubt that. I really do. She might have been selective in her relationships, but I doubt that she was without passion. And they did have several children. And later in life, when her husband had been sort of horrible, it's such an ignominious way to go. He was run over by a milk truck in the road outside the house. And for someone of his, stature, in such a way to die right there like that in front of her, that's pretty harsh. And so, she did have suffering, in her life. She also has the planet Mercury, which is very wide, but definitely within a reasonable trine, to Neptune. And with Mercury and Sagittarius of philosophy, psychology, the higher mind, the sort of striving for further and further reaches into outer space and inner space, in trine to Neptune, is like, well, she's very likely to get it, because Neptune disposits her moon. And so that in the grand trine, we have this locked situation where she's emotionally guarded, and a woman in those days would not only have to be guarded emotionally, but also, she had to pay for being a woman in the world that she was in. And she and her husband, Pierre, had basically what was probably an ideal relationship. That's what it looks like all around. She did form a relationship with a colleague of theirs after he was killed, but several years later. It was a huge scandal. What Scorpio is not going to run into some sort of scandal at some point in their life? And, she was meant to go and pick up her second, mind you, Nobel Peace Prize. And she was telephoned. Well, maybe they didn't telephone. I'm not sure, but anyway, it was communicated to her. I think it was by phone actually by then. She was communicated with, and there was a big scandal. And it's in the newspapers, and I think I've even got a slide of it on here, because she was having a relationship with a man. Wow, how absolutely incredibly, why you should have a relationship with a man and expect to get a Nobel Peace Prize is beyond expectation. So there's the woman being shunned, shamed in public, absolutely defamed, being told by one of the members of the board of the fellow who actually founded the Nobel himself, was the discoverer of dynamite, was by people who were running the whole system. She was she was informed that she should not show, that she could still have her medal, but she doesn't dare show her face, and that she was advised not to go. She did go. She went, which I think is just fabulous, because it shows that she was not only not going to accept her visionary moon Chiron in Pisces, visionary value and worth, second house, and her Uranus of her creations and her incredible dedication to tons of pitch blende, out of which a tiny, tiny bit of radium could be gathered. I mean, hundreds of tons they dug through and managed to do what scientists do to bring the radium into existence. And radium is a bone seeker. Yeah. So, I mean, that's what happens if we get radiated, is it hits the bones first. And there she has her grand trine in water, in one of the signatures, in the sixth house of basically her job. So it was her work. And then the ninth house of her studies, in the 10th house of absolutely astounding fame, well-deserved, with the 10th house in her career, which was ruled by a non-existent planet at the time. That's why I've got this here. I mean, how come? Because you see, Pluto, which we don't know about, I mean, nobody knew that Pluto existed at the time, forms the head of the kite, because we have Pluto at 15 Taurus, sextile Uranus at 12 Cancer, and sextile the moon and Chiron at 16 Pisces. So we have this kite formation. Yeah? And so the tail, or the head of the kite, the leading force, the thing that pulls it forward, happens to be the invisible Pluto. She also has Jupiter square to Saturn. Now, Jupiter-Saturn square people, I mean, my understanding of them is that they tend to be really run against the status quo, not in an active revolutionary fashion. Like a revolution like the 60s, when we did some talk on that. But in a kind of socially accepted way, she would just slip in and find her way into a social situation that was completely outside her possibilities. And that was to join the company of men. Here's a picture of them in their laboratory. Now, this laboratory, by the way, is still in Paris, where it was when they were doing this really dangerous work. And look at the microscope and this really strange apparatus and all this marvelous stuff. Because when she was a little girl, when I was reading the book, I thought it was so sweet, because her father was, there was so much trouble going on in the Poland area at that time. I'm not going to take the time to go into it, but I will go into the fact that her father was the head of, he was a chemist, and he was very well known, and he was teaching in a university, and he was thrown out. He fled from what was Poland to Poland, which became Poland, and to France. And so when they met, they just immediately found a great rapport. And to cut to the chase, they were working in this incredibly nasty shed beside their house, where their two kids were sleeping and living, and they were working in this shed. And that shed exists today in Paris. It's hermetically sealed because it's still radioactive. It's just amazing. And so I say they worked in a leaking, unventilated shack, a miserable old shed, quote, true, in which radium showed no intentions of allowing itself to be known to humans. Marie, however, to her, it did show itself as a beautiful color, because one night, after many of years of their, not like that many years, but 3 or 4, after all of their work, she somehow in the night said to Pierre, I'm going out to the laboratory. And he said, well, you can't go out there alone, it's raining or something. And so he goes with her. They walk in. Apparently, her first words were, what a beautiful color. It has the power to cure and to kill. So that's the magic. Glowworms, she thought they were. So it was beautiful for a while. Here's a picture of, in 1927, Solveig, well after her awards and getting her. I mean, can you find the woman in here? I've looked at this a lot, in this picture, and I still, before I started, I was inserting it because I modified this workshop today, or this lecture today. And I put this picture in the last minute because I knew it existed and it was in my files. Anyway, can you find her? You can see Einstein, he's clear as a bell, yeah. This would have been, my mom was born in 1921, and this is 1927, and Pluto was sighted in 1933 or 4. I've got, of course I know what it is, but it's just before the sighting of the planet Pluto. Look, there she is, cute. Cute as a bug's ear, stuck in the middle of all those guys. All of whom were absolute geniuses. All of whom were actually her friends. She really broke the status quo. Again, the Sun, Saturn in her chart. Okay, so in this one, when I gave this lecture, and it was probably a bit more organized when I was doing it for the ESAR conference, to the ESAR conference dinner lecture. So I was up on the podium, and at the lower table beside me was my friend Robert Hand, and everybody, loads of friends. I mean, a lot of these people in the astrology that we started up in the 60s and 70s and businesses in the 80s, we're all there. Anyways, Rob is sitting right down below. And so I put this up, and he gasps. And he goes, oh my God, when he sees this composite chart. Or sorry, the relationship, the two people. Sorry, I was spacing it out. Marie has the Sun opposite Pluto. Yeah. And he has the Moon opposite Pluto. That's pretty impressive. I mean, they're obviously, an alchemical wedding. Right there is the missing link, because of course they didn't know, and none of, if any of their astrologers would never have known that, but they both had the Moon in very close connection to each other. And that in itself is, known to be really important, because the Sun and the Moon, remember we looked at the sleeping, the sort of loving couple, the king and the queen, the Sol and the Luna together, and they merge and they become the hermaphroditus, which is the image really of a person who is just without, they have gender, but they don't have sex, in the sense that, it's really very, very, well, I can say it's the perfect solution. That's what this is, solutio perfecta, which in Latin means has to do with, making the perfect union. And so here they have it, the radiant couple, amazing. So, just looking at this, and I look at Pierre, because we didn't look at his chart, he has Pisces rising, and, at 12 degrees, and sorry, 8 degrees, and her south node is 12 degrees. So her south node is a nodal axis, I'll say, as opposed to south node. The nodal axis runs right across his horizon. And so there is definitely, obviously, I mean, I don't have to be of any sort of mindset. This is fate. I mean, this is fated. This is utterly, absolutely destined to become an extremely dangerous product that they create. But it's not intentional, as I've insisted. Did not either of them come up to any level of being inhumane. So they both have this mysterious planet that didn't exist. Yeah, it's completely non-existent, in opposition. And Pierre has his moon, which is the flip. So he's got the feminine function, moon, opposite to Pluto. And she has the masculine function, sun, opposite Pluto. And that's pretty much the way it was, you know, the way they were. And he's no slouch. I mean, everything in her horoscope, basically the majority of the inner planets and the sun, all above the horizon, whereas he has most of his planets below the horizon. So you see, there was something to this business of extroversion and introversion. I mean, she was an introvert. She was not, you know, as I said, she appears to be a cold fish, but she wasn't. I mean, she was loving. She had kids. I mean, she was a beautiful person. But she was an extrovert in the sense that she put herself out there, and Pierre was basically the backup. And so, and he was happy with that. That was all fine with him. You know, she wants to go to the shed, then we'll go to the shed. And he, you know, was very, very close. I mean, he was very, very close father to the children. And so he has Jupiter in Gemini in his 4th house. So, you know, he is very much, you know, a domestic man with a really close connection to his kids. It's trine her Jupiter at 28 Aquarius, his is 24 Gemini. And so she's the one that's more outgoing, and she's the one that has the control, Capricorn rising. He is Pisces rising. He really is, also was brilliant. I mean, what these people, what they each individually and together went through during the time of being born and educated into high-born Eastern European families, that has been absolutely destroyed, you know, by cultural upheavals, revolutions, shifting borders. But, you know, she had to follow her passion, and he as well. And so their mating, their coming together was absolutely, I think, phenomenal. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to throw into this mix? Let's see. She has Neptune at 12 Aries, and he has Neptune at 26 Pisces. Yeah, so he was obviously a bit older.
Oh, Erin, his moon in the 8th.
Yes.
Would that represent Marie?
I think the moon, yes, I think that it shows, yes, that he's deeply attracted to a mysterious figure.
Uh-huh.
Okay. That would be, and it also tells me they probably had a hell of a good sex life as well.
Right.
So I don't really see any cold fish hanging about here. There's a bit of Neptune and some Pisces, but that's about it. But when I read that, you know, that's what Einstein said. I thought, oh, you idiot. Whatever. At least she wasn't, you know, flaunting it. So, you know, here's the thing: is that when she and her husband, the two of them together, and that's why I'm sort of recommending that book called Obsessive Genius. It's an incredible book. It reads like a stunning novel. It's absolutely brilliant, and it talks about them. And the thing is that they had this passion, and the two of them, they actually begat from their children a kind of downline, a dynasty of scientists. And another one of the granddaughters actually won an Academy Award Yeah, they should have got that too. A Nobel Peace Prize as well. And they were all physicists and mathematicians and so on. So, I mean, one of her daughters and her granddaughter were Nobel Prize winners, and in sciences. Whereas she was the first woman ever to get it. So she had a lot of power. I mean, I think she was probably quite sexy. I mean, and I think Pierre probably was too. Those pictures are really beautiful. They're really handsome people. So I think their love affair and their sort of what's called the unspoken handshake in alchemy, where you agree to collude together, but you don't. It's not conscious. It just is an unconscious collusion, which is very, very Neptunian, Piscean. Yeah, he's got Pisces rising, Neptune in the first house, and she's got her moon in Pisces. So they did have this kind of collusion that would, be perhaps described best as this sort of deeply, deeply important, unconscious marriage. I'll leave it at that. Okay, so now that we've looked at their natal charts, this is the composite. And I think this is what contained it, Marie. She sacrificed a lot there. I don't have the time to go into. I have a huge article that was supposed to be published in Archive, and they changed their minds. But I have got, a very long-ish article on Marie, 23 pages, I think, with loads of footnotes. And so here we have the composite grounding them. Because with all that Pisces and, Jupiter rising, Jupiter in the fourth, that's a little flaky in some ways if it's not sort of brought together. Maybe it can't manifest, yeah? I mean, Earth is a sign in which we have manifestation. And so this is also, like Pierre's chart demonstrates, is a kite. This grand trine in Earth exits into Chiron if you think that Chiron is worth putting into a horoscope as a hardcore body in the chart. I took my time in adjusting to it. I'm kind of an old sort of classicist, but that happens to be Pierre's ascendant. So Pierre's ascendant is the head of the kite, yeah, for this flying, if you will, into the realms of mystery. So I mean, the fact is they were really together as a couple. I mean, you would never separate them in a million years. The devastation of his death was global, and of course, she had the children as well. But it shows a distinct partnership. Fated, the vertex is an Arabic part that has to do with fated encounters. So Mars, conjunct the vertex, trine the moon in Capricorn in the 11th house of groups, organizations, relationships with people, your cohorts and so on. And then trine Pluto, which still didn't exist. I mean, Pluto is like banging on their door. And it was like 3 years just before she died that we sighted Pluto. So she was there for its sighting, but I don't know that she knew anything about what we're talking about here. So with this moon in Capricorn, and I'm going to show all three of them pretty soon. The moon in Capricorn in the 11th means that as a couple, their relationship shone, okay, in their organization of people, in their group, whoever their associations were. And that it's in a trine to Pluto, we wouldn't have known that. So let's not even talk about it. It's trine Mars. So Mars in the 7th, fated encounters of a passionate kind. If we look at Mars in Virgo, Virgos aren't, as dull as people tend to paint them. I'll just say that for Virgo is that it actually is very passionate and loving and physical sign. It's an earth sign, so they have this grand trine, this unusual, unknown grand trine, with Chiron, the wounded healer, rising on Pierre's own chart. And so there you go. Here we have the natal charts, and we have, what time is it? It's 2:43. Oh boy. Okay. Pierre and Marie, this is their composite chart, all right? Sun, Mercury, and Venus in an opposition. This is a good lesson. If you set a composite chart and the Sun is on one side and Mercury or Venus on the other, leave it. Because we all know that the Sun and Mercury and Venus are never more than 28 degrees for Mercury and 48 degrees for Venus apart in the natal horoscope. Yeah, like in her chart, we've got the Sun, we've got Venus and Mercury all together with the Sun. Well, they split because of where they are in each of their own natal charts when we blend them together, like I showed you in that diagram. And so we end up with the Sun opposite Venus and Mercury. Okay, that's a credible composite configuration. It does mean that the purpose of life in their lives has to do with being socially admired in a cold way. Okay, they're very recognized for their work together, and so they, their partnership, with the grand trine in Mercury and Moon, Pluto, and Mars, indicates one thing, in other words, a unification of energy together in practical ways. But this shows that their rebellion and one or the other's unusual characteristics is completely unacceptable in some ways to the status quo. However, what we want to look at is that the values and the vision and their mores and their social creative forces, their whole ideation of the amazing, which is Uranian and very Aquarius. It just all meets together rather nicely. And I like that picture also of the Sol and Luna. Anybody got any questions about this? Because I want to move on to something even more dramatic. Okay, I'm going to move on to something more dramatic. Bang. Oh, hang on. Okay, sorry. Okay, this is the result of her work. Yeah. It took a long time to develop, but they did do it. And so where she had said, and it's missing from the picture, this has the power to cure and to kill. So what I said here is the composite chart between Marie Curie and the Trinity test in July the 16th, 1945, just down the road from where I live. And it was in Socorro, New Mexico, which means Socorro in Spanish, and El Jornado del Muerto means the journey of the dead. Because between El Paso and Socorro, there was no water. And people coming up from Mexico, it's been going on forever, by the way. Well, anybody that keeps up with what the heck is going on in the United States right now is just appalling. There's always been Mexican people here. I mean, what's wrong with that? They're fabulous. They're passionate and warm, loving families and so on. A bit wild and stuff, but that's not the problem. The problem is that coming to the United States is always dangerous. And in this case, they had to walk the El Jornado del Muerto, the path of the dead. Okay, so here we have is what I think is an ultimate image for the nuclear age, leading to August 6th and 9th, 1945, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is the, let me just, I'm going to move this for a sec. Right, okay, I'm seeing it, yep. Okay, so this is the composite relationship between Marie and the first test of the atom bomb, at which time Oppenheimer cried and quoted the Bhagavad Gita. "I have become death," he said. Very, very emotive little clip after the bomb went off. And to this day, anybody living south of Socorro, there's a higher ratio of death in young people than almost anywhere in the States. So the wind is still blowing it around. A lot of 40, 50-year-old people, women, die. So here we have, now I think is a brilliant image with Moon in the 4th in Capricorn, opposite to, we'll say the whole thing, the whole stellium of Uranus, of sort of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. I mean, we had a Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. We have them. We've had it on an occasion as a transit cycle, but that this is what she and years after her death, well, not that long after her death, because she died in 34, I think. So this is only just 10 years after she died. Wow. We have this Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in the 10th house from the 3rd into the 12th house, where the hidden heart of the energy lies. And so this business of the Trinity, I think, is really important, because he named it Trinity based on a poem by John Donne, who's a marvelous poet, referring to the 3 gods of the time, which are still the same 3 gods as we're dealing with today, yeah, all going at it hammer and tongs. But here we have, in the 9th house, the absolute global, I mean, because the 9th house rules the entire world. It has to do with Sagittarius and Jupiter, and transiting planets going through it very often signify that we have more contact with people from other cultures and so on. So we have the whole world involved in a secret mission, Sun-Saturn conjunction, that would forever change people's ideas, and involving the Moon in the 3rd house. So I can't really interpret that in any really intelligent way, except by saying, well, it's the Moon in Capricorn opposite Uranus and Neptune and Pluto, which is squared by the Sun and Saturn. So we've got every single heavy-duty planet that you've got that sits there in this composite chart between Marie Curie and the Trinity test. Does anybody have any comments to make about this? Because you know that what a nuclear reactor is it's a container, and it's contained with Saturn, cement, and it keeps the the more adamant aspect of the danger, the heavy water, which would be Scorpio, I would think, or Pluto. And so if you have a good container with the heavy water, the scorpionic image in the core, and it's cooled properly, it's an energy producer. And that in itself is not bad. But what happened with this showed that what would really happen is it's really bad, and that Marie's personal horoscope is actually very much involved in this. Here we go. Now let's go back, and because we've got a few minutes, do you have any thoughts or questions about what I've been talking about?
Yes, I do, Erin. Okay, I notice in this composite chart that the ascendant is 14 degrees Libra.
Right.
And it's flipped over from the natural houses, right? So at 14 degrees Libra, which to me indicates something very out of balance. What do you think?
Well, yes. I mean, thank you, because it's not only out of balance. We got Mars, singleton, nowhere, not even relating really, to any of these planets. I mean, Mars is, quincunx Saturn, and it's, trying to Uranus, and it's got hot aspects, but everything is over on this side of the chart, on the ascendant side. So yes, it is definitely imbalanced, and it impacts the entire world.
So any other comments from our audience or questions?
All I have to say is it's absolutely fascinating.
Isn't it amazing? I mean, this is the beauty of astrology for me, is that I don't plan anything. I'm not into creating a model of thinking. I don't believe in that. I think that's, heresy to the freedom of thought. But what I do, and what I seem to have become, is a person who gets a kind of, sort of her ass on fire about an idea, and then I continue to go into that idea until I get to what it was that I really wanted to know. You see, like I thought, since I was 13, I've loved Eve Curie, because when she was really small, there's a story that they talk about in the family is that because her father was a physicist and he has managed to get some of his stuff out of Poland and so on, and they were sitting at the table, and they weren't even allowed to go out. They weren't allowed to leave their homes. These Polish people, and so anyway, she was 3 or 4, and her sister says in the book that she would they would all get around the table because they were all home taught by the dad, by Pierre. They were homeschooled by the father. He was a teacher, but he got fired from his job. It was just a nightmare. And but he got to stay home with the kids and teach the kids. So they're all sitting around the table doing their little homework. And she's just very small, and so she hops down, and she was a favorite of the family as well. And she's like looking on tiptoe into these cabinets that have glass, glass doors. Looking into the cabinets, there's all these like little scientific apparatus and physics and so on. And she says, and so her father says to her, Marie, those are called physics apparatus. And so she goes, physics apparatus. And then she starts, much to the delight of the whole family, and this is all written down by a sister, much to the delight of the family, she skips around singing, physics apparatus, physics apparatus. I mean, she was like, by the time she was 3 to 4, she was into the test tubes and into the various, microscopes and various other aspects of physics apparatus. And so they all thought that was so cute, and they all just adored her, and it was another cute thing that she did. And so she was actually quite a fun person. Yeah, I mean, people who knew her, she was hilarious. She was very sardonic. And of course, what she died from was that which she worked with, and it's called pernicious anemia. And so she actually died of plutonium poisoning, of radium poisoning. Yeah, that's what she died of. That which made her life, it also took it. So have fun.
Wow, that was great. Let's get some comments from our audience. What did you feel about this presentation?
Yes, hi, it's Delphine. Well, I really appreciated the presentation. And this is a particular subject, this composite. and the union of the sun and the moon. This is something which really interests me.
Good.
I have this particular conjunction with a friend of mine, and we have rarely seen each other over the span of 20 years, but there's always an instant rapport. And I wonder if but it's exact conjunction. It's really exact. Except that my sun is a 12th house. So I wonder if it's a rare conjunction, or
You mean each of your suns are conjunct?
So his moon conjunct my sun.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's not composite though. You would find the.
No, in synastry it's in synastry it's conjunct.
Oh, it's a great friendship. It's deathless. You know, it lives forever. It burns and reflects, and there's a lot of, you know, just unspoken and then spoken. You know, when you finally do talk, you probably talk to each other over top of each other. You know, there's a very warm connection there between sun moon people who have it. It's like really deep, and it's a lifetime.
It's deep, yeah. Okay. So is it rare, or is it?
Well, every 29 years, 29 days, the sun goes around, and once every 12 months, the moon goes around every 29 and a half days. And the sun is there once a year. So no, it's not that rare, but it is rare, okay? In other words, it happens all the time. But to know about it, because I was looking out my window, happens all the time, but to know about it is the most important thing. You see, the thing can exist, you know, in perpetuity without any context. But the minute that you see context and you have the relationship, that's what counts. That's what makes it strong. Yeah. And that makes it unusual. Yeah, because it's not an unusual thing. Sun, moons happens every month. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that you've got something that is very, very special, but it's consciousness that brought it there. Yeah.
I don't know. Not sure how much it was conscious and unconscious.
No, you're conscious of it.
Oh, yeah.
I think differently. I mean, I'm not saying that you consciously chose it. I'm just saying that the consciousness of each other, and then realizing that, wow, we've got this amazing connection astrologically, that's the consciousness. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
Great point. And so, Erin, that brings us to the end of your meeting. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts on this topic?
No, except, you know, we're very fortunate to have these meetings in a collective like this because of the time that we're in on our planet right now. And I really bless it, these kinds of, you know, collective gatherings, small groups, large groups. We're very fortunate to be able to think like this. Very fortunate. Thank you very much for being part of it.
Thank you so much, Erin. Would you all please thank Erin Sullivan, everybody?
Thank you, Erin. That was really, really interesting.
Thank you.
I'm glad. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Erin.
Erin.
Fantastic.
Bless you all.
Thank you. Great.